numb and my heart's feeling heavy. Got anxiety in my blood, but I'm about to get ready to talk about it, and ashamed of the way that my mind works straight, flexing like a knee-jerk. Got a lot of things on my mind, got a lot of things to pursue. Ain't no stigma gonna stop me from reaching my potential. What a nice view.
Well, cool. Thank you, Joy, for coming on the podcast. Welcome to Talk Mental Health with Logan Noon. You have an Instagram profile called Hungry to Thrive. That's the number two, Hungry to Thrive. And you are currently a therapist right now in Carlsbad, correct?
Yes. So I'm originally from Hawaii, but I moved to LA first, and then did my grad school in California. Would move back home to Hawaii for a job, and then finally I was just like, I need to live in California, but now I live in San Diego, which I love.
Okay, awesome. I spent a bunch of time in Sacramento, but
nice.
never have lived in Southern California, and my wife absolutely loves the beach, so maybe one day we'll get down there. I kind of hope we do. I'd like to turn into a surfer one day. We'll see if I can hack that. But you also, so you're a therapist, and then you also have like an online fitness coaching program that you run, correct?
Yeah. So I have an online coaching program that basically helps people with like stress eating or dealing with like self-sabotaging mindset, like feeling frustrated about not wanting to go to the gym, or feeling really defeated about they're not losing weight. And so I deal with all the psychology and like the mindset and like people's limiting core beliefs, like, oh, I'm inadequate. So I'm not a trainer, but I like to help people see the psychology used in fitness, in your eating, and your overall lifestyle.
Well, you're a mind personal trainer, it sounds like.
Yeah, I guess so.
Well,
yeah,
and
mind
it
and
seems
emotion.
like weight loss, whenever I struggle with weight problems, and whenever I look at kind of like a weight loss goal, I don't look at it as something I need to achieve physically, but it's really like a mental game.
Very so.
Like the discipline. And for me, it's not so much even getting myself to the gym, because I like working out. It's the diet. I stress eat, and I have a bad test score. Maybe I get in an argument with my wife, whatever, and I just go to Taco Bell. That's like my place. And it's super bad. So I'm excited to kind of learn some stuff from you today. So let's just kind of, I guess, start with your origins. Like, what led you to get an interest in becoming a therapist, and why did you want to choose that as a career?
Okay. So, my dad originally was going to a doctorate program for psychology. And then he didn't finish it because he felt like people can't change. People will only change if they want to. So he really discouraged me to go to psychology. And I knew like at a young age, like in high school right away, that I wanted to help people. And I thought psychology was a way to help people. And so in college, right away, I was like, that student's like, that's what I want, and I'm going to go get it. So I was very like focused academically and, like that. But then in freshman year, I noticed that a lot of people, gain weight, freshman 15, right?
Yeah.
But I would always see these women like with these like fitness magazines or those like tabloids, like being like, how to lose weight in like so many weeks, right? And it was so disempowering to see women at that age, at 18, already going to feel like they're defeated, or they're inadequate, or, and so that kind of like piqued my interest of like, oh, how do we get the psychology to help people not feel inadequate? And then, I was such a like pioneer in that age where I would tell people, and I'll tell my professors, and they'd be like, oh, no one does that. Like, there's sports psychologists, but those are for only athletes. And I was thinking like, why can't we have something where it's really empowering for people who are regular fit enthusiasts, or people who really want to lose weight but don't have the psychology tools? I wanted to make it super accessible. So, 2012, I moved to LA, and I began like just fostering all my ideas, and probably not until like 2015, like 3 years ago, where I really got like a solid ground of like understanding core beliefs, like where some of us, we have like beliefs of like, oh, I'm only able to like lose this much weight. And so we keep replaying that loop, that story, like, or, the same loop of like, I'm very successful when I eat all clean. But that's like all or nothing thinking. So I go really deep to help people see like there's practical ways and a long-term solution instead of just extremes. Or a lot of women tend to do like a lot of punishing like exercises where they're like, oh, I have to do cardio for like an hour. And then that starts a really poor relationship with movement and exercise, because they'll start seeing, oh, I ate this amount of food, so I have to work out now.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of... Oh, go ahead.
No. Yeah, so I was just basically trying to show people, like, you don't have to follow that model. Like, you know, you probably learned it from someone, but there's other ways that you can, like, feel really happy or excited or just have, like, more confidence, like, moving. Yeah.
Well, and one of my favorite posts actually that you made on your Instagram profile, Hungry to Thrive, at Hungry to Thrive on Instagram, is you said healthy doesn't equal healthy, as in HELLTH. And that's a concept that really resonated with me, because years ago, it was like probably 2012. And really, I remember the big motivator for me is I was like 280 pounds. I remember just being absolutely disgusted with myself that I was 20 pounds away from being a 300-pound man. You know, at that point, I probably had like B-cup man titties. They were just disgusting. I hated myself. And in many ways, it did motivate me to get started, but it just was a bad place to be. And I did a radical, workout regimen and diet, but it really was hell. Mm-hmm. It was effective in some respect. I ended up losing like 75 pounds. I got in the best shape of my life, but then I did really what every single person after a huge weight loss does, is I gained it all back after, a few months. I remember I got injured because I was working out so hard. And I put the weight, not all the way back on, but I gained back another like 30. And so it was extremely frustrating. So how do you convince your patients to embrace like a healthy lifestyle, but that's also enjoyable?
Oh, so definitely I teach people so the first thing that you learn in the fitness industry or from your doctor is like, oh, you should have cheat meals. And I take away all language of anything that has a connotation of like negativity, that there's shame, or you're doing something wrong. So it's never cheat meals, because you're allowed to have choices, and it should be called treat meals because everyone's allowed to have indulgences, but you're just like having it in like a different portion size or, with your own permission. So I think with a lot of like extreme workouts or diets that we see, it's always within this like black and white, mm-hmm. and just giving people like permission, being like, you can have that, but are you eating it for like the right reasons,
Mm-hmm. And you also it seems like you don't really advise your patients to get too caught up in the whole counting calories thing.
No, never. Yeah. Cause like for me, everything's gonna be about longevity. Like I'm Japanese, and so ancestrally, they just eat intuitively of like variety of things. And also like we've only recently, with all the technology and all the data, we have everything that shows like, oh, you should count this, or you need to measure this. And that ends up causing a dependence on something, and you lose trust with yourself. So some people I see who are like count calories, they become so compulsive and become so fear-based when they eat out. They're like, oh, like I can't eat that because it has like 500 calories. And then that causes that poor relationship with eating and exercise, because now everything's by numbers instead of just intuitive, like, oh, I really want that. And then when you do want that, can you give yourself permission? You end up not having all these like intense cravings or intense shame and guilt.
So though, someone like me, right now I'm sitting, I've had a couple injuries this year, and it's been very challenging. So I turned 30 in 5 months roughly. And so I'm freaking out. I'm losing my mind right now. And so I have a weight loss goal of 200 pounds. And you reference a lot of times, like setting goals is kind of the best method to really motivate yourself. And I completely agree with you. Like, what is it? The acronym SMART goals, like specific, measurable, attainable, whatever. But so if I'm not counting calories, then how do I necessarily achieve that goal of weight loss?
Well, there's two ways. Like you could just do performance goals, like if you're in like fitness wise, like in the gym, or you could do this one model that I do, which is like you focus on one attribute for like the whole year. So if you do you tend to like procrastinate? Like when it comes to like exercise, do you tend to like be inconsistent? Like for you?
I mean, really for me, the exercise isn't necessarily the big challenge.
It's the eating.
Yes, it's very much the eating. It's not even necessarily, obviously Taco Bell, is my Achilles heel, and that will really challenge me. But for me, it's actually mostly the quantity. I have trouble stopping eating. And I can make excuses and say this is a side effect of valproic acid, which tends to increase your appetite, tends to cause weight gain. But in reality, I've been this way my whole life. My mom's an amazing cook, and I would stuff myself until I felt nauseous. And so how do you then, like someone like me, a patient like me, how would you then advise them, like, okay, without counting calories, though, lower the amount of food that I am intaking?
Like for you, do you gain satisfaction from the fullness, like a fullness of eating a lot?
I guess, yeah.
So it's like, I'm going to ask you all these questions that like can help you build awareness. So some people we like from my family, it's a very like, here's all the food, you can choose whatever you want. And then afterwards they're like, oh, you can have dessert too. It just assumes, right? So we equate eating like a lot of fullness, like quantity wise, with love or with like pleasure, or sometimes for a lot of people, fullness equals like zoning out, like relaxing, like detaching from stress.
Yeah.
So, that's one way to show people being like, okay, so if you're always going for fullness, what emotional reasons is it for?
Okay. Trying to get that food coma sort of thing.
Yeah. Some people love that because it secretes that feeling of like ease, because when you're always on the go, or like, especially like medical students, you guys are so performance driven that by the time you're at home, you don't want another like thing to perform or another standard to meet. You just want to like detach as being like zoning out, like,
yeah,
like a sigh of relief. So sometimes a lot of our eating can just come from like that needing to like transition to like, I just need to like calm down, but we're doing it through food.
Yeah. Well, then I'm glad you brought up medical students, because then another thing I think, especially medical students, but really anyone who's very busy, is I don't have time to make meals. I don't have time to do this. So I'm going to go, buy Wendy's or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So how do you teach your patients, that use that as an excuse? I don't have the time to eat healthy.
Yeah. So first I ask them like, if they don't want to cook, that's fine. You can just like find other solutions. Like I say this, if you're going to have fast food, then you have to swap it with something else later on as like something like more nutritious or healthy. And I always tell them like, if you're going to eat fast food or whatever comfort food you want, you can't associate guilt with it, because the whole longevity goal is to have positive experiences with all food, because sometimes we end up overeating out of guilt. But if you take out the shame and the guilt, you'll probably over time, your relationship with food will change, because you'll be like, I'll stop because the fullness, I'm starting to notice the fullness factor, or I'm starting to notice like, I'm already calmed down. I don't need to have, like that consumption, like, I'm so going crazy right now.
Yeah.
Go first.
We've been talking a lot about purely, I guess, kind of the diet side of this. And one thing that, when people find out I have bipolar disorder, the first question that they ask me is, what pill are you on? And then the second question that they ask me is, okay, how often do you go see a therapist, kind of thing. So I really like kind of your approach to mental health, that you really encourage your patients to look at your body as kind of a whole, that your mind and your body are interconnected. And I really wholeheartedly believe that. And as an osteopath, I think a lot of other, doctors in this realm believe that too. Now, I like to say that my best medication really for my insomnia and my anxiety is like heavy weightlifting. When I go do squats, when I go do deadlifts, I'm absolutely dead. I'm just so tired that my mind really shuts off, and it doesn't keep me up late. I don't feel so worried about things. I don't feel as irritable. Now, there's a lot of people, though, that have never been exposed to fitness and they've never really set foot in the gym. Maybe they're really intimidated by it. Also, when patients are first, prescribed some means of psychiatric medication, a vast majority of them, the common side effects are weight gain and fatigue. So how do you work with those type of patients that feel they are so hindered by their psychiatric treatment or just feel so uncomfortable stepping foot into a gym?
Well, so I go with based upon people's like temperament and personality. So even though some people who already have like the weight gain or the fatigue, but their personality is very driven, so I give them two options. They can still do the yoga, so when you're in that zone, like a lot of your thyroid and like, your hormones are all out of whack. So you're going to feel really fatigued, right? So a lot of people that recommend is like restorative things like walking and yoga. But honestly, some people don't get like that fix. Like you obviously love like, the heavy lifting. Like I love deadlifts and squats. So I could not only do yoga. So I give them a switch off. I say you can do both, but just short increments. Maybe instead of how you usually do, like, even some people who used to be prior athletes who are in medical school, they want that long, intense, like 1 hour and a half workout. But be honestly, like, you don't have that time. Time is such a luxury for if you're really busy or you're, doing all your clinicals or, you're not getting a lot of sleep. So just short increments of like 10 to 30 minutes. And psychologically, at first, you're going to feel really upset because your ego's like, well, we always perform at this level. Why aren't we getting this, like, this hit, But over time, the consistency, you're going to feel like so much more better. So it's kind of like dealing with the bruised ego first, the pride of like, why can't we, work out at this certain expectation and intensity? But over time,
and I think a lot of it is also when you go to the gym, especially when you're a newbie, you go to the gym and you're maybe the weakest person there. You're maybe you're going the slowest on the elliptical kind of thing. And I think people get so intimidated by that. But, and I just remember when I first started going to the gym, I had those feelings. So how do you tell people to really get over that?
Oh, yeah. So I love this conversation because I feel like that's like the main psychology of like what hinders people in all weight loss or getting to the next level is the intimidation and the fear. So a lot of your fear is being exposed. So you're afraid of being exposed that you are inadequate, or fear of being exposed that you're going to embarrass yourself because you don't know how to lift properly, or a fear of sometimes like even our child wounds of being picked last. So basically feeling like people are watching you. And all those are obviously like totally irrational. I know logically we can say that, but emotionally when it happens, you feel that like anxiety. And so a lot of what I tell people is to do one of your favorite activities first. So when you first go in there, you're ready, like your brain will switch to being like, oh, this is really fun. I'm enjoying this. And more of your focus is going to go onto like the positive. But if you go straight into a program, like one of those like app programs that people, follow or on YouTube, and you don't know the hell that you're doing, then intimidation is going to reinforce that you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So it's it's like you have to go in with a plan, but you also have to do something that you really enjoy first, because that sets the tone for your mindset, your emotions to confirm like what you're doing, you can do this, and then follow like with the momentum.
Yeah. And there's, I certainly felt intimidated when I first started going to the gym. I didn't really know what I was doing. Thankfully, I had a great friend, good old Michael Gene Favor. He's now a physical therapist. He's one of these guys who's like, he has an 8-pack. He was like born with it, and he just knows what he's doing. He showed me how to lift. He showed me the proper technique and everything. And that's really how I got over that intimidation factor. Now, there's one thing that I've really learned that as a male that I kind of have trouble relating to, but my wife has really educated me about this. Especially in the weight room, I think it's most of the time more males, right? There's a lot more guys that just feel comfortable weightlifting, whatever. Maybe it's the testosterone, who knows? But one thing my wife has educated me on, she knows how to exercise, she knows how to squat, all this stuff, but she feels very intimidated going into the weight room because she feels like people aren't looking at her judging her weightlifting style. She feels like she's getting checked out the whole time, and she just it makes her feel uncomfortable. It's not an enjoyable experience, and it's something that I struggle relating to because I've never really felt that way as a man. Maybe it's happened, I've just been totally oblivious, but I think it's certainly something that more females deal with. So how do you address females when they address that concern?
So definitely that is totally relatable because I don't deal with that anymore now, but when I first started working out and I started seeing my body change, I used to feel so self-conscious. And I guess the way that I overall kind of changed my mindset was that sure, people are looking at me, but I always start noticing well, I should feel good about myself. Or my friend always says act confident and no one will question you. So, and after a while it's really odd, the psychology. So when you start acting confident where you don't care if people are checking you out, they stop checking you out. But if you start acting insecure, people tend to watch you for some reason. I don't know why the psychology is drawn to that. And sometimes I just tell women, just own who you are because other women are looking for you to be an example. So there's this woman that, I noticed she had a hard time putting stuff on the squat bar. So I helped her. And then she's like, I don't know what to do. And I just told her I was showing her. And then later on, she watched me work out and she's like, you look so confident. And I'm like, well, I'm just leading by example. I want other women to feel super empowered that they can move their body healthy. They can love themselves and you belong where the men are, you have a place. And so take charge. And it's interesting how that shifted. If you start shifting of you're doing it for other women, you feel you deserve to be there. So
yeah. I think that's a great outlook. Yeah. Cause
I hope that makes sense.
It absolutely does. Cause as a man, I don't always know how to help out this kind of issue besides obviously not checking out other women at the gym. Yeah. And I'm a married man. I don't want to do that anyway. But I do sort of get not, I guess frustrated isn't the right word, but I do feel so many women are intimidated by the idea of weightlifting, maybe because it does feel like an old guys club kind of thing. But, I've, through my years of really improving my understanding of the human body, I think that everybody, both sexes, should be in the weight room kind of thing. It's just such a good thing for everybody. We shouldn't just be, women on the ellipticals, men on the squat racks kind of thing. And that's just such a poor way of thinking of things. So now I'd like to kind of transition this conversation into, I guess I'll sort of start this off with a story. So when I first started into medical school, I sort of knew that I really needed to be on it to remain sane. There's such a high stress in medical school. There's already a high level of burnout, especially someone with bipolar disorder. I need to really be on it. So I was super good about working out. I was playing basketball. I was lifting weights, doing all the things that I know that make me happy. But I was really starting to fall behind in school. And so I ended up sacrificing my gym time to get additional study time. And it did help me academically, but also I was suffering from insomnia. I was having a lot of anxiety about my grades. I was just being more irritable, butting heads with my family, my wife, my friends a little bit, just having a harder time managing my emotions. So I like the post that you said where you kind of told the story about your mother called you when you were at the gym. And, there was some part of you that said oh, I'm in workout mode, I can't answer that. But I like how you try to have, a milestone for being healthy doesn't have to be purely fitness. And so now I try to kind of incorporate, I know that I still need to exercise on a regular schedule, but I also need to study. So I try to put those two things together, especially with this big board exam that I have coming up. So when I'm on the elliptical, I am very tempted to watch my favorite show, The Americans on FX, but instead I'll watch some of my, Boards and Beyond videos or sketchy videos to educate myself while I'm learning, or while I'm lifting weights, I'll sometimes listen to audio lectures for science. And, I definitely don't feel that same level of motivation. It's not as fun. I can't get myself amped up. I know I'm not getting as good of a workout, and sometimes I do feel very guilty about that. But at least I feel I am sort of still continuing my academic demands. So how do you sort of advise patients, like, I guess, to adjust their fitness goals, or maybe not feel so guilty if they don't get the best workout in the world?
Okay, so for what I recommend, so is your first priority is obviously to be competent in your academics, right? Like that's where for yourself, right? So then then you should have a value that you just like focus on as you're like working out. So for example, maybe for you, while you're working out, it could be like so I have this one person, they give up really easily when they exercise and when they eat. So the value that they have to focus on is to do it until like failure, or like we just call it 10x. So they're doing something that others are unwilling to do. So even though it's like even though the increment is like only 30 minutes, every single rep and everything with their mindset is focused on giving their ultimate best. So for someone who's like short on time, then you should focus on maybe a value. It could be like you're listening to your audio recordings for like half your workout, and the other half your workout is like pure bliss, where you can just be like, okay, I can like
listening to the new J. Cole album, enjoying myself.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then maybe sometimes some workouts you just be really intuitive. You ask yourself, what is my body really feeling? Does my body really want to be, on the treadmill learning right now? Or does it really need to take a mind dump and just physically like listen to music that you really want? And when you start doing it intuitively, you'll like have more energy on certain days to exercise the way you want to. And other days you'll be like, well, I think I really need to like focus more on my academics because this is really important. And I don't want to increase my anxiety because I'm putting off my learning.
Yeah.
But yeah, just see it intuitively if you can like do that instead of always having to be like, because sometimes for some medical students, when they anticipate that they're going to be exercising with what they're learning, they're going to not want to exercise because there's, the association has changed to where it's like continual work, like, learning, like studying with like an actual like activity.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have to, that's why I said like, just be intuitive, be flexible.
Yeah. So now I'd like to kind of transition the conversation more sort of away from fitness necessarily and diet, but I guess more talking just about therapy kind of thing. So one thing I always say when someone is just starting a therapist, just starting to seek out therapy, is you have to think of it as like dating. You go on a date with this therapist, see if you like them, and if you don't feel bad, cut them out of your life and move on to the next one. So how do you sort of advise patients to feel comfortable starting therapy, and what sort of schedule do you like to see them on?
For me, like once or twice a week, depending on people's levels of like how motivated or how self-aware they are, because anything that you have accountability, you have a higher greater chance of actually staying on your path, remembering like what's your main target, understanding your why. And some people are super driven and self-motivated. They're just inequipped, they don't have the right strategies. But once you give them that, they're like, oh yeah, I know what to do. There's a book that I really like. It's called The Four Tendencies. It's also by a psychologist, Gretchen Rubin. I don't know. Have you heard of it?
I have not.
Okay, so this one's really interesting. So she has these 4 categories and she's done research on it. So one person is the type where they're, what is it called? Obliger. So everything, whatever expectation they put on themselves, they will do that. They'll follow it by the T, and on top of the external circumstances, roles like, being a mom or wife. So for them, they're so self-motivated. And there's people who they do better when they belong in a team. So if they have to show up for the basketball team, like, as one of their requirements, they're going to do that. But if they have to show up for themselves, like maybe for themselves, they're like, oh, I need to eat healthy. They wouldn't be able to meet that expectation. Yeah. So the book is basically, it teaches you why you may not reach your goals. And it's based on your personality and habits. So with that, I always tell people, I'm like, first read that, because then you can be self-aware of like, oh yeah, definitely the rebellion. Like when someone tells me what to do, I do the very opposite. Yeah. So that's a good starting tool for anyone like who's trying to understand themselves or their partner or with like fellow patients, that you're continually giving them medical advice and they keep saying like, okay, I'm going to do it. And then they don't follow through.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's called The Four Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin.
Okay. So what would you say to a person who, you know that they need therapy, but you feel that you're not the right therapist for them?
Oh, I'm very frank. I'll just say, I really appreciate you that you're taking the time and the interest to seek therapy, but I don't think we're a great fit. And if you just choose me, I'm not letting you grow to be your best version of yourself. So it's like when I switch it to like, it's the responsibility is still on them.
Yeah.
And to let them see that there's like they have total potential. Because I think people, when they seek out therapy, they just want to be heard that they have potential, and that it's possible. And when you switch it to that, they're like, oh yeah. So I'm totally like okay with saying like we're not a good fit, because I know that it doesn't serve me, because my energy is taken away, and I want them to be like with the great fit that they feel they can be total transparent.
Yeah. So one thing that I really learned, I think the best concept I learned from my therapist was this idea of mindfulness. And I do think I can kind of achieve mindfulness even when I'm working out, because I'm so just in the moment, focused on what I need to do right then and there. But so how do you advise patients to really use mindfulness away from the gym? Do you teach them how to meditate, or what do you think of mindfulness as a concept?
With like just in general, when I help people, I'm like, I always tell them like eating and exercise is just a small part of who you are and your lifestyle, but your whole lifestyle is just like, what is the quality of your internal thoughts? Like what's your repetitive thoughts you always have? And so that's like one way of having mindfulness is like, okay, if you keep saying like, oh, I'm fat, I don't feel good about myself, that's going to set the mood and the emotions of feeling really depressed, ashamed. And a lot of mindfulness, I give people, some people are verbal, so I tell them to record in like, the microphone app and just like vent everything out. Mm-hmm. And that helps them get mindful of like, oh, this is how I'm feeling, Okay. Some people are writers, some people just write. So I give them different strategies based upon their personality of what actually I think would fit them. Some people are, like talkers, like, so they, the microphone app is like the best thing for them.
Yeah.
And it's really beneficial because later on I tell them, okay, listen to what you said a week ago and see if you've grown. And most times they've totally grown, or they've overcome that obstacle. But when they hear themselves talking, they're like, oh my gosh, I did say that. Oh yeah, I did have those thoughts, but I don't have those thoughts anymore. So it's like a good evidence. Like people need evidence for them to change. People need evidence to see their potential. So those are like very tangible ways to show evidence to people in like therapy or just like in general.
Yeah. And I really like that suggestion, because I remember my therapist years and years ago suggested that I should start journaling. And, I laughed in his face because I knew I was never going to do that. But, eventually he convinced me it was a good idea, and I did start making almost like mood journals. But, that being said, over the course of my 8 years or so of being diagnosed, I probably have only journaled maybe 5 times. It's just writing is just not my forte. But the idea, obviously, as a podcaster, I enjoy talking. So I do think maybe trying to look at almost as a voice journal would be a good way to sort of track my emotions, kind of thing.
I love journaling, but when I'm in the car and I can't write it on my notepad when I'm on my phone, right? So I just turn on the voice memo and I just start talking, and then done. So, and it only takes like, a few seconds.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's easy, and everybody can do that. Siri, open voice recorder,
Yeah, exactly.
So I think, you sound like you'd be a tremendous therapist. I think if anyone's in the San Diego area, I definitely want to reach out and have them find you. So before we kind of get to like how they can really find you the easiest ways and other services that you offer, what frustrates you about the mental health system? Like, what improvements do you think we could make? I love that all the mental health professionals have such huge hearts. Like, I totally commend all of you for working really hard. But however, the mental health industry, we're totally unsupported. Like, there's easy ways to get burnt out, experience trauma, and not having
ways to cope easily or resources for you to express your trauma, you know, with dealing with some patients or crises. And the mental health field, I feel like, is a little behind compared to medical field in the way of like medical field's always advancing. You know, they totally pride themselves in being preventative and proactive and educating others. And I think the mental health is still in some ways in a crisis mode where we just react. Okay, everyone come back, you know, everyone come help this like school shooting, you know. And I would love to see mental health, the generation to change where it's like very preventative, very proactive, and it totally comes from a positive place. Because right now, mental health is coming from like so much like shame or urgency of like when it has a crisis.
Yeah.
So those are my main things. And I tell many people who are in the psychology field who are feeling burnt out, I just let them know that awareness. Like, hey, I know you're burnt out, and it's only because the model right now is coming from a crisis. It's not your fault. You're not responsible. So always just reassuring people like you are doing your best, but it's just right now our industry hasn't fully changed into progressive yet.
Yeah. And I mean, in my personal experience, my first conversation with a mental health professional wasn't until, you know, I had a manic episode, you know, I was having suicidal ideations. So it really was that crisis. And I remember I actually gave a speech at a Rotary Club here in town, in Yakima, Washington. And someone came up to me and they asked, do you feel primary care doctors are adequately trained to address mental health concerns? And I was like, I tried to answer politically correct, but I was like, no. And I was like, I don't think so. Because he said he had personally lost a friend to suicide. And it was one of those things where like nobody saw it coming. It just came out of the blue. It was a very tragic story. And he actually saw his primary care doctor that same week. And how he said he was screened for mental health was he was handed a questionnaire that basically was just like, are you depressed? Are you fatigued? And he's like, it's very easy to just check no. And if the doctor doesn't see anything, they're just going to gloss over it, move on to the next thing. And, you know, I understand it might be a systemic thing because they have such little time with patients. But, you know, even in my medical school curriculum, it does feel like behavioral health and mental health concerns is a very afterthought. We've done almost every single organ system in the body, and mental health, behavioral health is the last thing that we do before the board exams. So it doesn't seem like people are going to be that into it, take it very seriously. And that's certainly it frustrates me greatly.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think social media has exposed mental health, which is good. But we just need it from more educators and like from the actual graduate programs to bring more, not just like awareness, but just like a value. I think a lot of like our professors, maybe they have like a lot of experience in like surgery or just like with people, but they themselves, you could probably tell they don't value mental health. Like they don't know all the skills of self-care or understanding the psychology of like that importance piece. And so I think as this generation, there's people who are super passionate in all fields who still talk about mental health. You know, it could be in fashion or it could be people like you right now. And I think we're like the pioneers, you know, we're setting the course to show people like this is a new standard now, and it makes people feel uncomfortable. But this is what makes change is when people see new standards and feel convicted. So I totally commend that you are like having this podcast and like, you know, having change through conversations, because that's where people feel really heard is through conversations.
Yeah, well, and you know, thank you for coming on, because it's really what's most enjoyable for me about the podcasting is I come from a area where I used to do YouTubes and YouTubes, is that a word? Videos on YouTube. And, you know, but most of those videos were just me by myself, and most of the speeches I give are just me by myself. And it's okay. I, of course, like telling my story, but over time it does kind of feel monotonous, and I've gotten in almost a routine where I can tell my story and even, like, get emotional if I need to about my story, but I tell it so many times that, you know, I don't start crying anymore when I talk about my suicides, where initially I did. Suicide ideations, that is. Now, but being the podcast, I just get so excited because I know I'm reaching more people, because people who may not identify with my story maybe can identify with some of my guests. And that's one idea that I just really love, and one thing that motivates me to continue growing this podcast. So, you served kind of the San Diego market for mental health services. So if someone's listening to this in the Southern California region, what would be the best way that they could, start to use you as their therapist?
Well, I actually like people to look at Instagram. Before I used to be kind of feel like shy about that, but I tell people look at my Instagram because
that is Hungry to Thrive. I'll connect that in the link or whatever. But okay, just wanted to say it again.
Because I want people to see if they resonate with my messages or if they haven't even thought about searching some of these messages. Because sometimes when you just do a therapy intake, for them it feels so not cold but so foreign, and that they kind of get really stiff, or their responses are very short and shy or timid.
Yeah.
And so when you can read people's posts just in general on Instagram or, Facebook, they feel so much more at ease. And that's when they were able to take down their guard. And then when they see you, they're like, oh yeah, by the way, I really like this story. And it's an easy conversation starter. So people, if you, when you're writing your Instagram post, be really thoughtful. Like think of one person that you think, oh yeah, they're really going to need this. Or think of like that one friend that you want, and just kind of like write that message for that person. And so it sounds very like genuine, and you want your Instagram post to be genuine. You don't want to just be filled with like these inspirational quotes,
Yeah.
And so that's how like change happens, is when you read from the heart, when you write from the heart. So
on your Instagram page, that Hungry to Thrive, like there's a link maybe to your
website.
Okay, cool. So they could maybe hopefully schedule an appointment with you. And,
yes,
if I ever know of anyone in that San Diego region that's looking for therapists, you'll certainly be one that comes to mind. And of course, Dr. Manipod maybe can complement the psychiatric services on the other side. I know she's in that general vicinity. I don't even know exactly where. Now, though, you also do more than just in-person therapy. You host like an online fitness program, or it's called Hungry to Thrive program, correct? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, so this is like online coaching. So it's like, could either be one-on-one online, like Zoom calls, or it could be in a group. But I only deal with like emotional eating, stress eating, what we were talking about earlier about like you feeling inadequate or self-conscious while working out. So it's like dealing with like a specific target, and it's like totally my passion, because a lot of people actually deal with stress eating, or overeating, and it's just bringing a lot of empowerment and making people realize like your choices, you can totally choose the thriving choice. You can totally choose the one that's going to make you feel really amazing, instead of the one that you're just feeling like, oh, I'm going to give up again,
Yeah. So how does that program work? Are you actually writing fitness programs as well for these people, or do you encourage them to like get their programs elsewhere and you handle sort of the mental motivation sort of piece?
So I only deal with the psychology, the mindset, emotions, all the limiting beliefs, like I'm inadequate, or I'm never going to be able to be successful. So I deal with only the psychology piece. And a lot of people want the fitness part, but I always tell them, like, if you can always have the best fitness program, but if you don't have any psychology, or you're still using your, the years of programming that you've been using as your psychology, you won't be able to lose weight, because you're always going to hit that same block of, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, or doing it like, in these very extreme ways. So psychology first for everything, not just fitness or eating, it's just like in your general life, like that is what dictates like how we behave or how we treat ourselves.
So where do you though advise those clients where, you're motivating them to go to the gym and they're starting to feel it, they're starting to actually go, but where do you advise them to go to start to get educated on, these are the exercises I should do today, or these are, how I properly squat kind of thing? Like, how do you advise them to educate themselves?
Oh, so I just refer them out to like a person who's like my colleague that I trust and who has the same mindset as me. So that's like, I totally value that. Like, I love collaborating with people only with like the like-minded. So it's not counterintuitive, or where I'm telling one person to just like be intuitive, and the other coach is like saying like, no, you need to be restrictive.
So, count your calories. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have like a list of people that they would feel really comfortable with.
Okay. Well, awesome. Well, Joy, thank you so much for coming on today. You taught me some good motivation techniques that I want to use approaching my fitness. I want to really maybe now start voice diarying, or at least almost make a mood journal with my voice, because it's very, for me, I do have a lot of patterns, especially in medical school. Like, I feel very unstressed or, relaxed right now, being that I'm on break. And then, of course, around exam time, I get more irritable, I sleep worse. And to how I can start to develop techniques, and maybe on those days right before exams, those are the days that I need to go to the gym and almost have, like you called it, a mind dump, where I can just sort of relax and really kind of focus. And then on those days maybe where I am feeling a little bit better mentally, I try to take advantage and educate myself while I'm at the gym and take advantage of that time.
So there was a research study that like I love that they did it on like students before they exercise, so there's students that exercise, and then right after the exercise they studied, and then there's students that studied while they exercise, and the students that actually just exercised like the way they wanted to, right after when they studied, they had everything go into long-term memory, like, and it was immediately because of all the flow of bloodstream. And so for you, maybe like you can still do like what I suggested, right? Like half and half. Like you can study a little while you're warming up, and the rest, you have the mind dump. But they said that you should exercise first and then study, because of all the blood flow. You're more relaxed. You're not so irritable. You're not so stressed. So it's just something to consider, to always, use your advantages with your, physiologically and emotionally.
Yes, certainly. And what I find when I do study when I'm at the gym is I get a little bit out of it, but not certainly as much as if I just sit down and truly focused. The one thing that I do sort of, I think, get out of it is almost just the terms. Like if I continuously hear all these crazy medical terms, they don't sound as foreign to me when I come back and try to study them later, kind of thing. Just because it's almost not the first time that I'm hearing them. But I would like to read that study, and it definitely makes a lot of sense, and one thing that I would like to apply to my studies. Well, Joy, anything else that you would like to tell the listeners about yourself before we call it a day here?
I really appreciate everyone who's listening and felt, really encouraged by this message. Always just like continue to believe in yourself and choose a choice that you feel like it's going to make you thrive and feel so proud of yourself. So thank you so much, Logan. I had such a pleasure talking with you and just being on your show.
Yeah, this was rad. I hope to have you back sometime. This was really fun.
Yeah, for sure.